Shalom, welcome back. Now we're going to be doing lesson number 9. For all the vocabulary words which we're going to learn in lesson number 9, I'm making a separate video for that, as well as all the vocabulary words that will be for all the other lessons. And this way, I can focus on this, and the vocabulary can be just a secondary thing by which, if you want to go to the vocabulary, go look it up, watch the video, go over all the vocabulary words you can. We're here, we can just go through the instruction and just go through it step by step. So without further ado, let's begin. Alright? So let's begin our sentence here. Vehem lo yadu. Vehem and they. Lo didn't yadu know. Ki for Shomea listening. Yosef is. Ki for hamitzlit, alright. The interpreter, benotam, is between them. Alright. So now let's go through and let's rip apart this actual sentence here. Alright? Va. What is va? Va, remember, is the conjunction. And we know that the va is the word for and, right? The next one we have is our pronoun, hem, which is they. So here we have and they. The next we have is our adverb, which is the negator. Now, this negation is very important because what it can express is an absolute state and a definite state, okay, which you can say is one and the same. When it says, for example, lo, and it's used in a command form, it means that this is an absolute state of this is not to happen, period, okay? When we're looking at this state here, the definite state is talking about what was just the state of being at that moment, okay? So lo yadu, yadu is the word know. And if we go through here, we know that the vocalization for the pa'al form, the third person, the masculine/feminine plural form is what we find is the a, the schwa, the root letter, and then finally u. And if you go to the chart, you'll find that this is the third person masculine/feminine plural. Why is it masculine/feminine? Because it's used for both the females as well as the masculine form, and also can be used as the collective form. Okay? So this here, which is our third person, agrees with the noun. So we know that the noun that's used in regard to the past tense is in agreement with the noun here. So we know this is the subject. So hem lo yadu. So now we have to put it in a more logical form, okay? So we would say, and they did not know. I want you to understand that when we look at the adverb lo, don't think of it as a word so much. Think of it as the negator, okay? Because you might have to translate the negation differently depending on the context of how it's being used, okay? So when it's negating something, it's going to either negate a state of being of what something was, a state of being of something that will be, or the state by which something is in itself, okay? And so that's why, to say no, didn't, you can kind of get confused yourself sometimes when you're trying to figure out how to translate. But if you know that this is a negator, and you know what the verb means, just think of the opposite of what that verb would be if it was translated by itself. So if you say the word yadu means they know, right? Hem yadu, they know, right? What is lo? It's the opposite, okay? So just think this way when you're looking at the word lo, all right? For they did not know, ki, now we have here our conjunction, ki, which is for, ki, shomea. Now, shomea, we haven't even gone at all, but this is the first time we're going into, of participles, okay? Participles is when we take a verb and we put it in the present tense form, and that verb form can create two elements. We're going to talk about those two elements. Number one, it can just state a present state of action, or it can express a noun type of idea. And that's what participles do. So like, the word shome'ah can be a listener, okay? That's literally what you could translate it as if you looked at it just as itself, a listener, because the word shema means to listen, right? So, and the listeners listened on, okay? That the word listener could be utilized. That's when we're utilizing it as like a noun. Because participles have a fun little attribute about itself. It's a verb that can function also as a noun, okay? So here, we're looking at not in the sense of a noun as a participle noun function, but as the present tense verb. So what are the present tense form for Paul? Well, in the third person, we're going to find this is the vowel form. You're going to see the holum here. It can be a holum malay, which is the holum that has the vav, or it could be a holum that's without the actual vav. So if you see the holum sound, and you see the tsere underneath the second root letter, you're looking at the present tense of the masculine singular form for the participle. Now, of course, since this is a ayin, which is a guttural, we have to have the furtive patach underneath it, because we have to assimilate the understanding that this cannot stand as a sound by itself, and so therefore we have to make the sound that goes in it. So shome'ah becomes the ending. So here, shome'ah is literally listening. Okay? So think of shome'ah, think of the participles. These are commonly, but not to be confused, they're commonly your present tense verbs that are like the ings, okay? Listening, spelling, reading, hearing, breaking. That is typically what you're going to find a lot of times when you're looking at your present tense participles, okay? So the present tense verbs here commonly find that, but they're not absolutely in that state, okay? There are exceptions that we find many times. But think of the word sheme'ah. He is listening. So who is listening? Here we have Yosef. So Yosef and sheme'ah, there's only four forms. There's only four forms of participles, okay? The first form is like this. We have our shin, our mem, an ayin, and of course we have to add the furtive patach underneath it because of the guttural, okay? This is the masculine, and this is the singular form, all right? You can utilize with this as opposed to what you'd find normally with your present, your future, and your past tense verbs. You could put all of the pronouns that would agree with this. So he would be used. So you'd say hu shomea. You could say you would be used. Ata shomea. So he is listening, you are listening. Ani shomea, I am listening. And of course, you can use a noun, such as Yona. Yona shomea. Yona is listening. Okay? And this is for the third person masculine singular form. Okay? So the form, once again, is still the same thing. You have to agree with the actual subject. The only separation is we don't have pronouns on participles. The pronouns are separate like we would normally when we're writing the words I would say, I did say, you said, you would say. We're always separating the pronoun to the verb, okay? This is the only time where you're going to actually separate the pronoun and verb is when using the participle form, which is the present tense. So therefore, we have to understand that so that we can make that note in our head that this is when we're ever utilizing this separation. This is the point by which that separation will exist. And this is important to understand, okay? So, if we look over here, now we have the word Yosef. So what is it? It says, Vehem lo yedu, and they did not know, ki, well here actually it'd be because, or for, yeah, because, sorry, or that. Actually, this would be better, that. I'll use that. That's what is better, actually, that. Remember, ki has multiple ways of being used, okay? And when we're looking at it, we're going to have to ask the question of what is being used here and how is this going to translate correctly. You might have many times you look at a word and you say, I know what the word means. It can mean because, it can mean for, it can mean that. But then you're going to have to really go through and say, okay, and I'm not reading this whole sentence out to translate it. I'm looking at it right now like you are, word by word by word. And so you can see I had to correct myself real quick here because I knew that this didn't make sense. And they did not know, okay, that Shomea Yosef, that Yosef is listening, okay, ki, because ha mitzil berotam, because the interpreter and then I have to put the word is benotam between them. Alright, I'm going to break apart some parts here. So we get here. So Hamitzil. Now this is not a part of the book. I added this because I wanted to show you something real important here. That is important to see in the fact of what? Well, the word Hamitzil, there are two possible roots this could mean. Okay? There's two possible roots, right? So the question is, what is it? What is the possible roots? Okay? The two possible roots here is Lamed Vav Tzadik. Alright? Tzadik Sofit. Okay? One root means to deride. Or to scorn. Right? The other root here, if we look closely at the board, right? The other root here means to interpret. Alright. Why am I saying this? Why am I saying this is important? Because when we look at this, we find that there's more that goes involved in our learning of Torah, and more that goes involved in our needing to understand the different roots, and to understand the fact of something that's very important to know this, okay? If you're using any of these Hebrew dictionaries, okay, and you're looking at the roots, And the root gives you two diametrically different definitions that have no connection between the two of them. Don't believe in your mind or think in your heart that one root means both things. That's not true. You need to understand this. If Lamed Vav Tzadik means to interpret and also means to deride and scorn, well then you have to realize this. They're not the same root. They're completely two separate roots that look the same. That's the issue we have to understand. Okay? So, what are we supposed to learn from this? Well, this is important here because this has to do with a major part of our investigation. Okay? And we're going to rip apart and look at this very closely here. The word hamelitz comes from the he field form. Okay? In the he field form, we look at the fact that the yud, whenever the yud is placed in between the first and the second root letter, we know we have he field. Now, in this case, mem is not the root by which we are using. Okay? Mem has to do with the participle form. So literally what happened is this. We have Lamed, Vav, Tzadik. Alright? Lamed, Vav, Tzadik. That's in the Pa'al form. Okay? The he field form wants to put the Hey here, but then it wants to change the Yud, the Vav, into a Yud. So now it's Hitzil. Okay? When we do this, we realize in the he field form that in the participle, all the hey verbs, not hey verbs, but all the heys that we use in the past tense form, we're going to find are going to change to become mems, just like we see in the PL form. So if the PL chart, if you've ever looked at the PL chart, you're going to look in the participle form that all of the beginning of the words have a mem in front of it. He field has the same thing, okay? So now we have melitz instead of helitz. Helitz would be he interpreted. Melitz is he is interpreting, all right? But now melitz is being used as a participle, which is functioning as a noun. So melitz literally means the interpreter, okay? So the hey here is changing this verb to act as a noun. So hamelitz, so that's why we have this beauty that we have to learn that verbs can act as nouns. It doesn't mean that the verb is going to be using anything that a verb would have. It just means that this participle is going to literally be transformed into a physical noun and used as a physical noun. Okay, that's why when you understand that beauty of the participle, you begin to see how much you can see the vocabulary is going to change things. So here you have melitz, which means is interpreting, but you use in the participle form, it means the interpreter, okay? Or literally a interpreter if you used it without the hey article, all right? So here's the question, okay? Does it mean the interpreter or does it mean the scorner, okay? And this is the question we can ask. And this is what goes into interpretation. When we're reading the interpretation, we're understanding what's going on here, okay? And we see the fact that it says, Hem lo yadu, they didn't know, ki shumea Yosef, that Yosef is hearing, ki, that, okay, because hamitzil, the scorner, benotam is between them, okay? That's something that goes into deep understanding and questioning of what that means and why that used there, or why could that be used and stuff. But for basic sense of the meaning, we see that the concept that we can learn from this is that, you know, the reason why the brothers were arguing amongst each other over what had happened was because Hasatan, that's why he's called the scorner, Mitzvah, because he was between them. He was fighting between them, getting them all revved up to you think of wrong and to have the wrong understanding, to do the wrong things. And that's what the Torah tells us is Hametzil, is that the enemy tries to come and he tries to create division. Okay? Where also the Torah says Hametzil, the interpreter, is the fact that they were all revved up because they realized they were wrong, and then that means the Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, was getting them to see the fact that they was wrong, and that they were struggling with the fact that they had done wrong, and realizing that they need to do teshuvah. Okay, and so lastly, we have here. So if you remember this is the hey article here. The hey article makes the noun definite. Alright, and then lastly we have here Benotam. So I'm going to erase this and we're going to look at Benotam by itself so we can see this for what it is and what we need to understand about this. Okay, Benotam. I know this is not fully a part of the vocabulary, but it's okay because it's good to understand more and more of how things work. Beinotam is a conjunction of two words. Bein, which means between. Okay, and also bein also means like to be like in the midst. Okay. So when we think of bein, we're thinking something that's at the center of or the middle part of something. Okay? Bein o tam. Tam is basically yeah. Sorry. Thinking two things at the same time. This is the word them. It's the pronoun them here in this actual part. So, Beinotam means between them. Okay? And if you want to look at the charts for the participles, you'll see, not participles, but the prepositions, excuse me. When you want to look at the charts with the prepositions, you can look at the prepositions of all of these here, and you can go through it, and you can see through the actual participle the fact that this is the last participle that's used. Not participle, I'm getting confused again. If you look at here, the prepositions, if you look at the prepositions here, you'll see by the prepositions that I list all of the pronouns that you can read with regard to the word bein, and all the nouns that you can have added to them. And you can see it for yourself, the prepositions, and you can also see the pronouns, the endings that you can attach to them. And I hope this encourage you today to see the uniqueness of how we can look at scriptures and how we can pull things apart. It's very important that when we're looking at these things, to understand how the different elements that can exist in the Hebrew grammar. You know, how you can have a participle that can function like a noun in one case, and a participle functions as a verb in another case. And the typical form for the participle is the actual verb form by which we see. Things that are very important to understand, which this book, unfortunately, it kind of gets people confused in, and that's what I don't like, but I think it's very important to point it out, and I'm going to point it out, is the issue of when you're dealing with a participle, okay? Like, there's an example, they say this, Ein yotze ve'ein ba. Okay? You have to realize and understand this, okay? When you're interpreting something, to make it past tense because it only makes sense to your brain for a simplistic aspect that is past tense. This statement is not a past tense statement. Ein yotzei ve'ein ba is a present state. None is going out and none is coming. Okay? And that is important to understand this and stuff so that you can know that when you see the participle, don't reject what the participle says. Understand what the participle says. When you're seeing the context doesn't make sense, it seems like it should be past tense, then remember that what you're saying is, you're saying it should be this. Ein yatsa, none went out, ve'ein ba, and none came in. Okay? That is what you're saying. But you have to remember that you can't reject both. You can't just say, no, it should be yatsa, it should be this way. You have to remember the fact that there's a reason for why this exists. And that's when we want to investigate and understand what's the purpose for this, what's it expressing, what idealisms are we to derive from understanding why the participle was used as opposed to the past tense. And this is not a scribal error. Nothing is scribal errors, and I'm always going to say that to you. There's no such thing as a scribal error. Scribal errors are what people make when they don't have anything to do with Scripture. When it comes to Scripture, everything was done perfectly, designed perfectly for a reason. And we have to understand that, and we need to know the importance of it. The other thing I want to focus on here is the part by which in the book it brings up this statement with regard to Yosef. It says, Yosef HaShomea Diber. Yosef, who is listening, Diber, spoke. Okay? This here is important to understand, and this is why the chart that I gave, which is the initial chart that deals with the fact of verbs, okay? When you open up the main thing, which is it's like a verb help chart that gives you an example of this. Okay, the word, the letter ha that's used in front of participles is equivalent to the word asher when we use it in front of past and future. Okay? And what does that mean? That, which, who, okay? This is how we're using it, okay? So if I said here, if I said Moshe asher amar alehem, Moshe asher hu amar said alehem unto them. Alright? The same thing is here. Yosef HaShomea. Yosef, who is listening, spoke. Okay? That's what we have to remember. The same thing. This is for past and future. So if I said Yomar, Moshe asher Yomar alehem, Moshe who will say unto them, okay, that this asher is used for the past and for the future. For the participle form, we use the hey in front of it. So we have to remember that this hey functions as the relative pronoun for the present tense. And that's very important to remember and understand this stuff, because that's something that you will come across a lot here and there, especially when you're doing things and you're reading it in scripture. And if you don't understand this, don't confuse it with the hey article, okay? Because if it's attached to this and this is acting as a verb, then you have a relative pronoun, which is the hey being used as. So the hey is the relative pronoun here that's used in this sense. And it's just very important to understand the fact of these things, because of the importance of what these are doing. Okay, the grammatical aspects of what the hey does, how does it affect the verb, and because if this was used as a noun, let's say we took the verb off, Yosef HaShomea, then what is this now? Now you have Yosef, the listener. Okay? So in this case, this would act as not the relative pronoun, but rather this would be acting as the definite article. Okay? So if this is acting as the definite article, then it's going to make sense, because that means the participle is acting as a noun. If this is acting as the relative article, a relative pronoun, then we know that this is the verb in the present tense form. Okay? Hope you enjoyed this lesson of lesson number 9. We'll see you next time as we go to lesson number 10 and learn more biblical Hebrew. We'll see you around.